I got it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Stigma-Free Society's Facebook Live event. My name is Gerry Friesen, also known as the Recovering Farmer. I am a stress and conflict management specialist working out of a frigid Manitoba where it's a balmy minus 27 and feels like minus 40 with the wind chill. Because of my own journey with mental illness, I have a real passion in talking about it because it is in talking to others we can find a path forward for ourselves. You can learn more about me by visiting gerryfriesen.ca. Through this Facebook Live event, I am representing the Stigma-Free Society, which is a Canadian registered charity that aims to reduce stigma of all kinds with a focus on mental health. This event is a part of their Rural Mental Wellness Toolkit, an online community-based mental health program that creates access to mental health education and peer support training, as well as practical and relatable resources for those living in rural and agricultural communities. You can find the toolkit at ruralmentalwellness.com. I'm excited today to have the opportunity to chat with Kim Moffatt. Hi, Kim.
Hey, Gerry. How are you?
I'm not bad. I'm staying warm. And yourself?
Good. Nice to be here. Always fun to chat with you.
We always come up with something, don't we, Kim?
We do. We have lots to talk about.
As many of you will know, Kim is a returning guest. I talked with Kim back, I believe it was last fall sometime. But just to give everybody a reminder of who Kim is a crisis counselor who has worked in the field of mental health for 30 years. She was raised on a small mixed farm in southwestern Manitoba and specializes in rural and agricultural mental health. She provided counseling and crisis support at the Manitoba Farm, Rural, and Northern Support Services, as well as the Manitoba Suicide Prevention Support Line for 20 years. She is a lead facilitator for the University of Guelph In the Know mental health literacy training and has delivered 40 workshops throughout Canada. Currently, she offers private counseling and consultation to the agriculture industry that focuses on the unique needs of farm and rural people across Canada. In her work, Kim strives to break down the social barriers that exist for people to get the help they deserve. Through education and sharing her own story, she hopes to make it easier for others to do the same. When we last talked, Kim, we were talking about the various stressors people face, and particularly in agriculture. Mm-hmm. We talked a little bit about your story. I wanted you to come back on this show because I think it's important. We often talk and focus on the different stressors farmers have out there, but very often we don't talk about various stress management techniques that farmers and others can use. And so that's something I wanted to focus in on today. But I think before we go there, I think perhaps it's a good start would be to talk a little bit about the survey that was done by the U of Guelph in 2016, I believe it is, regarding stress in agriculture. And maybe if you can just provide a little bit of background to what that survey revealed.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a great place to start a conversation like this, Gerry. Some of your listeners might be familiar with that study that took place in 2016 by Dr. Andrea Jones-Bitton, U of Guelph. They were really wanting to get a sense of what's happening with our farmers out there in terms of their mental health and wellness. And there hasn't been a lot of studies really looking at that. And although you and we both farmed, we know about how stressful this occupation can be at times, incredibly stressful, and seems to be growing. The stress seems to be just kind of getting more and more challenging for our farmers. But it was really important to have this data presented to us so that people in the ag industry are aware of really what's happening out there. So they found some pretty interesting concerning numbers through that research. I believe in that snapshot analysis, they surveyed 1,100 producers across Canada, so they had a good sample size. 40%, I think it was 45% of those participants at that time said they were experiencing really high levels of stress. So that's concerning. Another number that is quite concerning to us is that 58% of those folks, if they were to visit a doctor, they could receive a classification of an anxiety disorder of some type. So obviously, folks are dealing with a lot of increased stress, increased anxiety. That number is particularly high. Another number that we're paying attention to is that 35% of those 1,100 participants also, might meet a classification for some kind of depressive disorder, right? Because of all the inherent stressors related to farming. And I think the last number that I would just share is important to me and obviously important to you and the good work you do at Stigma-Free Society. And that's trying to break down the barriers and the stigma that exists for people when they want to access support. And what this survey found was that a whopping 40% of people, feel really apprehensive, whether that's kind of internalized stigma or externalized stigma, to reach out and get the help that they need. So we want to bring that number down to 0 so that, those barriers don't exist and people can just access help and talk about their mental health, just like we do with our physical health. So.
Yeah. And that is so key. And every time we talk about this, and I've told you this numerous times over the course of the last year, that 58% that would be classified as an anxiety disorder or classification, whatever the technical term is, is quite astounding to me, actually, because you can just, to put it into perspective, there's another significant percentage that are feeling an anxiety, which perhaps it's to some people feels somewhat normal, but just so much reveals the stress that's prevalent.
Yeah.
And when I reflect on the various things happening in agriculture over the last year, I mean, you sometimes wonder if farming would ever be without stress. I'm not sure it ever will be. And then you throw in various events that happen. And of course, the pandemic is, whether you're farming or not, the pandemic has been incredibly tough on people. It's been incredibly tough on people's mental health. But even in the last 12 months, if you kind of look from coast to coast, where you have the potato problem on PEI, drought situation across the prairies. I know north of Winnipeg, there was a grasshopper infestation.
Yes.
You've had the extreme heat in BC. You've had the floods in BC. Like, it doesn't matter where you look, there's these events happening that just add to the daily stress that people have in a normal situation.
Exactly. And on top of that, with COVID, staffing shortages, people coming down with the illness and so there's a workforce issue as well on top of all of that.
There is, and we could probably spend the better part of the afternoon talking about COVID and the effect it has on us, but let's take a break from COVID just for a bit.
Sure.
And tell us, Kim, how does stress affect us?
Oh, in multiple ways. And I'm so glad we're having this conversation because it really can wreak havoc with all parts of ourselves. And I think we kind of have to take the good with the bad when it comes to stress. And what I mean by that, Gerry, is, stress can help us, as you know, in some pretty helpful ways, right? In farming, you wake up in the morning and you got a list of 20 things you want to accomplish in a day. So having a little bit of stress that motivates you and gets your adrenaline going, it helps us to get that kind of stuff done, helps us to prepare for tests or a wedding. It gives us that jolt that we need to get stuff done. Stress also is a good protector for us too, right? Because we've all known about the stress response, and its primary duty is to keep us safe. So, if we experience danger, we're able to respond and hopefully get out of the way of danger. So that kind of stress is good and it's helpful. And I think, what a lot of us are maybe experiencing right now is this chronic stress, this stress that we're not getting any reprieve from. There's not enough breathing room in between crises or changes or adaptations that we're having to make. And that's really impacting our wellness. And so, there's different parts of ourselves that stress impacts, right? Like our emotional health, our physical health, our the behaviors. We're seeing some changes in our behaviors and how we think. And I don't know if you want me to share a little bit about how
Sure.
exactly that plays out.
Sure.
Okay, sure. So we know mind and body, they're so intrinsically linked, right? So when we're struggling with stress and chronic stress, we need to pay attention to what's happening in our body, because it's often telling us that, something's amuck here. So for some of us, we might notice, I've got this headache today that won't go away. And that could be related to stress, or I have an upset stomach, body aches. And so just being mindful about those things and being curious. Oh, I'm under a lot of stress. Maybe that's the connection. Down the continuum, more stress means more bigger problems. So you can have increased heart rate, more serious illnesses like strokes, heart conditions, and some forms of cancer. So our physical health is directly impacted. Our emotional health is definitely impacted when we have a lot of stress, right? Because what happens when we're under a lot of stress, and hey, farmers especially, because they're strategizers, they're problem solvers, they like to work their way out of problems and are very good at that. But when we can't figure a way through that, we start to pay a little more attention to the negative thoughts that go in our head, like, oh, you loser, you can't get this done, or you can't figure this out. It hits us in our self-esteem and our sense of self-worth. And then, that leads to feelings of sadness, incompetence, maybe depression. So all of that stuff starts to kind of fester too with prolonged stress. And not just that, but also I think just in relation to how we are with other people, to other people and with other people is impacted by our emotional health. And so relationships get, under a lot of stress, as we all know, when we've spent a lot of time with our partners and families in this pandemic. So lots of stuff can come up with our emotional mental health as a result of stress.
Yeah,
You're nodding your head. Yeah,
like I can relate to all of this, and I suspect if you could talk to my wife, she would confirm everything you said about what happens when I get too stressed out.
Yeah.
But, just what you talk about relationships. I was talking to someone yesterday who was obviously feeling the effects of, the Christmas doldrums, if you want to call it that, the time of year we're in, and he talks about the expectations for himself,
yes,
and for other people. Like he says, I can't do anything right, and people around me obviously can't do anything right either, right? And so that's kind of the mindset we get into when we face overwhelming stress.
Exactly. And the third point to this is how it impacts us is in our behaviors, right? So we start noticing some of those things. We're really short. We're irritable with people. We've had enough. We're at our limits. There's all these political differences and ideologies that we're bumping up against at this time of year. And I think it's leaving a lot of us feeling a little bit depleted and exhausted. And other changes that we need to be mindful of, when we're under all this stress, what kinds of things are we turning to kind of help us cope? Are we finding comfort in foods that we know aren't healthy for us? Are we using alcohol, drugs a little bit more than we used to? Are we isolating a bit more? So all of those things we need to be kind of paying attention to ourselves, but also our loved ones around us too. So that's another piece. And then the last piece, I think, how we're impacted by stress is that our thinking part, right? How our cognitive abilities. And I've talked to a lot of farmers, you've talked to a lot of farmers, when they're under a lot of stress or when they're going through a crisis of some kind, they get frustrated because their thinking isn't clear. They describe it as being really muddled and they can't stay on task. It's harder to focus. When we were in the process of losing our farm, exiting our farm, we needed to make some really big decisions. And yet we were so incredibly crippled with stress that it was so hard to make those decisions. And that's frustrating, but it's what the body's designed to do when we're under stress, right? And there's actual biology, if this helps to normalize it for people, that it's not a personal flaw, but actually there's changes happening to our brain, some rewiring with chronic stress, and the thinking, the learning part of our brain kind of shrinks a little bit, while another part of the brain is becoming more hypersensitive to more stress. So stress kind of begets more stress. So there's lots of different ways that stress can impact our all parts of our lives.
Oh, without question. And what I find so interesting is that, and I never used to think about it in that way, but how stress is connected to our mental health, and how the two kind of go hand in hand. And with the more under stress you are, the more your mental health will deteriorate, right?
Right. It's so true. And I think, we all experience stress every day. We wake up there, we're going to have different experiences of stress. We're going to deal with stress in different ways throughout the day. And we all have mental health. 100% of us have mental health. And so stress can, if you have a lot of stress, chronic stress, you don't have the coping skills or strategies that are helping to kind of contain or minimize that. And maybe you also have a genetic predisposition for mental illness in your family and social factors weighing in on you, then we are more prone to developing a mental illness of some kind. And I love having these conversations about mental illness and mental health, because I think often we think that if you have a mental illness, that you can't have good and flourishing mental health, which is not true. I live with anxiety. And so sometimes parts of my life can feel really rough. And I struggle sometimes to cope. But I also have some really good coping skills and developed support systems. And so I can navigate that and still have really good mental health while living with a mental illness. And then on the flip side of that too, and I think this is kind of what I've been hearing from a lot of folks that don't have a mental illness, is that even though in the absence of a mental illness, their mental health has been really languishing through this pandemic. And so they're really feeling the impacts of isolation and anxiety and that kind of thing. So just the importance of staying on top of our mental health, no matter if we live with mental illness or if we don't.
It's interesting, and I know we don't have a lot of time to talk about some of the stuff you just mentioned as much as I would like to, but But you mentioned, your own coping skills. I know over the last 20 years when you worked for the Manitoba Farm and Rural Stress Line, you talked to innumerable numbers of farmers. I know you've helped me, finding ways to cope with stress. You've helped me in finding ways to manage my stress. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about some of the techniques that are out there. Some that work for you, some that might work for me. Some, and how we go about finding the one that works best for us.
Great question. And I think first of all, it's about knowing yourself, right? So if we could just take a little inventory or a walk down memory lane, and we think about, times when we've been through something difficult, what was I doing? And what did I do that worked? And what were some of the things that I did that didn't work so well? The last time we went through quarantine, I did these things. Hey, those weren't probably the best things that I could have tried. So maybe I should steer away from some of those, versus what were some of the things that really helped me get through that? So just kind of thinking about, sometimes we don't have to reinvent coping strategies. Maybe they're just within us that we need to kind of remind ourselves, hey, I was really connecting with Gerry at that point when I was doing well. Maybe I should reach out to him again, right? So thinking about what works for us. But, Gerry, a lot of conversations I've been having with clients, and certainly in presentations I've been doing, I've been talking a lot about the fact that this has been really hard for people, harder in ways that a lot of us can even imagine. We've lost people. A lot of us are just trying to get through a day. And so why don't we kind of go back to the basics of self-care, right? So really focusing on those things just to help us get through that day. Things like getting good sleep. And I know these aren't exciting and sexy strategies to talk about, but they're really important. And when we have a good night's sleep, you know, and get into that deep REM sleep, our body does the repair work it's needed, and we're able to face the next day better. And if we don't have a good night's sleep, research says, hey, our anxiety can go up as much as 30% the next day. So
okay, but can I put you on the spot right there with that one?
Yeah.
What about people that can't sleep well?
Well, that's a problem. And I'm sure that, you know, if you talk to those folks, they would say that they are languishing in other parts of their lives because of that. And so whatever you can do to work through the list of strategies out there to try to get a better night's sleep, I would really encourage that, because there's lots of research that says what happens after, you know, months, years of being in a deficit in that sleep bank has a detrimental effect on our physical health. But yeah, I feel for those folks. I've been one of those folks. It's hard.
And I shouldn't do that to you, Kim, because probably every technique we can come up with today, and we could probably put a negative spin on some of that. But just when you talked about the sleep issue, I was reminded of another person I've kept in contact with over the last few weeks.
Yep.
Who struggles with sleeping at night. And so sorry I interrupted you. So carry on.
No, that's okay. And you just have to find what works for you. So if you're not sleeping well, then hey, I better be paying attention to these other parts of my life that I know are going to be important. And maybe you don't feel like doing the next one, which is exercise, because maybe you're too tired, but yet exercise is really important. So moving our body in a way that we can, even though we might be feeling kind of sluggish. It's really cold out here right now, but just knowing that moving our body, it's going to help our mental health. It releases dopamine. It's going to put us in better stead of fighting off colds, flus, things that come at us, boosts our immune system. So we know that's important too. Nutrition, obviously, right? So a lot of us have fallen into eating things over, you know, a lot of time behind closed doors that might not be the best for us. But if we can eat more healthful foods than the ones that we know we need to stay away from, the nutrient dense foods, less processed foods, it's again giving our body a better shot of combating viruses, that kind of thing. A big one is social connection, right? And finding ways to stay connected to the people that matter with us, whether it's through the dreaded Zoom calls that we kind of suffer through, but we still get something from it, just connecting with people in that way, or going out for coffee or phoning somebody. I got a lovely letter from a friend yesterday that I was really excited to see. And so doing those kinds of things and making that a priority. And, you know, just a personal story. I went through a period of time not long ago where I had a little pity party and I wasn't connecting with as many people as I should have been. And I was like, you know, I was feeling sorry for myself. And then I was like, wait a minute, I know there's a lot of people out there like me feeling this way. So maybe I need to take this initiative and be brave and, you know, set a coffee date with my friend. And, you know, so it's kind of knowing about what you need and then being brave and trying to make that happen for you. So
yeah,
lots of basic things we can return to, bringing more laughter, levity into our life, right? Like sometimes when I need a good laugh, I've got a few good friends. Gerry, you're one of them. We'll share a good laugh, and it feels good to have that connection, and lightens the mood up a little bit. Watching funny videos, whatever, those kinds of things.
Yeah, and those are awesome ideas, Kim, and one that again, talking to someone yesterday, is something I've experienced myself, particularly in the time we're in right now. Like if you're too much connected to the news, for example.
Yes.
Everything seems to be bad news. If you go spend too much time on social media, there's nothing that will drag you down as much as scrolling through social media too much. So sometimes it's good to disconnect, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. I've seen a few people on my Facebook thread disconnecting lately, and I think, yeah, that's a good strategy for sure. And then there's, your coping strategies are as individual as they're very personal, right? So for a lot of people, volunteering is a really great way of getting outside of yourself, giving back to other people. It feels good. Doing mindful activities, hunting, fishing, knitting for your grandchildren, you might feel that connection to them as you're doing that activity. So it's just, doing things that you are aware that bring you some joy, bring you some happiness, help you distract yourself from a lot of the stressful stuff like the news that you talked about, that we all need to kind of take a break from.
So now you think I'm going to go knit something for my grandkids?
I kind of doubt it, but I could be wrong. I might misread you, Gerry. I don't know.
I think one of the key things you said, Kim, and kind of leave this piece with that, is the self-awareness piece.
Yeah.
And I am so guilty of not being self-aware enough. And so if we can, as individuals, if we can be more self-aware with what's going on, we can stay on top of things, perhaps stay ahead, one step ahead of this overwhelming stress or other mental health issue coming up, and getting us.
Yeah.
That's an incredibly important piece, is that self-awareness piece.
Yeah.
I know really just before Christmas, when I wasn't feeling all that great either, I suddenly came to the realization that, you mentioned all these different tricks, and exercise being one of them. I have a happy lamp, which is actually a sad seasonal SAD.
Yeah, seasonal affective disorder.
Thank you.
Lamp. Yeah, I have one too.
The eating piece, the different things to build up my dopamine. And so if I start lagging behind on some of those things, it can very easily catch up on me. And then I sit here, and just like you did, I became self-aware and realized, oh, well, if I'm not going to utilize these tricks that work for me, how can I expect my mental health to improve, right?
That's right. And I think I think it's good to have some self-compassion around that. We're going to do these things for a while and they're going to work. And then we're going to get a little bit lazy or think, oh, I don't need to do these things. And then we realize, oh, we're not doing so well. So we go back and we practice some more different self-care techniques. And that's great. That's normal. I think that's just the way it is with most of us, right? So I think just whatever effort we can put into it and make this a priority. Kudos to everyone. This has been hard stuff. Be kind to yourself, be kind to other people. There's a lot of difficult stories out there, and we gotta get through this together and watch out for each other.
If I talk to my friends the way I talk to myself, would I have any friends? I love that, and I have to remind myself of that so often, because, like you say, we beat ourselves up, and that's not helpful either.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a lot of people are looking around, looking at other people and how they're coping and comparing. Oh, I should be doing this, or I'm not doing enough of that. And I think the message is find what works for you. We need to stop comparing ourselves to what other people are doing, because that might not work for us. And just do what you can for yourself that works, and find somebody to talk to.
That was going to be my next question, Kim. If everything else failed, should I talk to someone?
Absolutely, talk to somebody. And
who should I talk to?
That's a good question, Gerry. Yeah. Well, we know that talking brings a lot of relief for us, right? Because when we talk to other people, often our stories get normalized and validated, and we feel less alone, and a lot of good stuff come from those connections. But I think, be intentional about what it is that you're needing when you talk to somebody. So right now I'm feeling I'm feeling a bit blue. I need to chat with somebody who's going to cheer me up. Who's that person in my life? And then contact them. Or I feel like I'm in need of protection right now. So maybe I need to call my mom or my dad if you have them around, or somebody who I know has my back. Maybe I'm in need of comfort right now. So maybe I need to reconnect with my counselor, or I maybe need to seek out a counselor. If you don't know who to talk to, call a crisis line. Those folks are really good at helping you to explore who's out there, related to whatever issue you might be facing. So they can give you some ideas and some suggestions, some numbers that you can reach. But sometimes it's just starting with someone that you trust, somebody that feels safe.
As you well know, I'm a huge proponent of talking about it. I think I know it's been incredibly helpful for me. First and foremost, friends or neighbors that, like you said, normalize or validate, which is so incredibly important. Secondly, to verbalize all this stinking thinking that's going on in your head, because if you put it out there, suddenly the load becomes a little easier to carry.
It's so
And
true.
at the end of the day, you know what? It's okay not to be okay. And there are professionals out there that can help.
Right. And absolutely, Gerry. I think that's well said. And I think sometimes people are afraid of sharing that darkness that lies within all of us. And we're afraid that might scare people off, or we might not feel loved or accepted. And there are people out there that are not afraid to, go into those dark places, the crevices where we hide a lot of this shame and guilt, or whatever it is that we're holding in there. And so not to let that stop you from reaching out, because there will be people that will walk that journey.
And you know what? I think we can end on those words. There will be people that will walk the journey with you, and that's so incredibly important. Thank you, Kim, for joining us today. Your insights into mental health and wellness certainly have resonated with me, as they always do. And I'm sure they've resonated with our audience as well. Again, you know what? It's okay not to be okay, number one. Number two, again, I'm going to repeat what you just said. Find someone to walk that journey with you. It's incredibly helpful. I'd like our audience to avail themselves of the many resources available in the Rural Mental Wellness Toolkit, which you can find at ruralmentalwellness.com. So till next time, thanks again, Kim, and everybody else, please stay well. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Gerry. Bye now.